Welcome to The Middle, a podcast about that messy middle in between job loss and the comeback, told by people who've lived it. From CEOs to veterans, athletes to analysts, we talk to folks navigating the unexpected turns in their careers and what comes next when the plan falls apart. These honest conversations will move you, make you think, and maybe even inspire you to leap into something new. Because behind every career pivot is someone just trying to figure it all out. And remind me, you grew up in Indianapolis. Am I getting that right?
You got it right. Indianapolis, Indiana. Absolutely. Born and raised.
Are you a Big Ten fan?
You know what? I am a fair weather sports fan. And so I went to IU for my PhD and worked at IU. IU football, the time that I was at IU was not a thing. It was really IU basketball with Bobby Knight. And now football, I think IU is like at the time of this talk, I think they're like 5-0 or something like that. And so their football team is on fire, and they had a good season last season as well.
I went to Michigan State, so I grew up at 10. And my brother went to Penn State for a study, so we're a very Big Ten, Big Ten family. My brother went to Penn State during like the glory football year. He went to the bowls. Like Penn State would go to bowls, and then he would go and he'd send pictures, and I was like, oh, it must be nice to have a good football team.
And when I was at IU, and really it wasn't until I left and worked at Virginia Tech, where I really began to understand the conferences. Now I knew that I was the Midwest, I was in a Big Ten conference, but I really didn't have a solid understanding of all the conferences, and it wasn't until I went to Virginia Tech.
Well, speaking of Virginia Tech, I want to start there because you moved into, and you told me it was a very high-profile role, and you called it your perfect job. So I want to ask you, what was the role? What led you there? What made it perfect?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I want to speak about the perfect job. When I went into it, it felt like the perfect job, but what I really come to realize that the perfect job is not the title, is not the job. The perfect job is the work that you do and what you make of the job. Some of the elements that made it the perfect job is that I was at the time in my career, I was still early in my career, early enough where I could still have room to grow. And bandwidth. I had the stature of the university. Virginia Tech is a major Research One institution. It is an institution that is recognized, at least regionally, if not nationally, for engineering and for its athletics and just for the beauty of the campus, the position itself. And so I progressively moved through the ranks from my lower days of a director all the way to a vice president. And so my first vice president role was at Virginia Tech. So vice president for diversity, so the highest level position in my profession at the time, diversity officer. So the vice president in higher education, the vice president title was the highest that you can go in that position. So I had the title. I had a seat at the table with the president and his staff and his leadership team. I had an office of about 11 people. I also had the salary, and so this is that position I made the most from a full-time working position, the most salary that I made. And interesting enough, it was the most salary that anyone in my immediate family made. And so now you're talking, so again, thinking about when you're thinking about that perfect position, okay, now I'm in a situation to where my salary exceeds that of my parents. So it's a generational thing that's going on, and there's a sense of pride from me and also from my parents as well when I ascended into that role. And then you also talk about the what comes with that type of role comes a certain degree of credibility, and also people begin to look at you differently, and they treat you differently.
Like stature.
There it is. Stature and clout, and so there's that type of stature and clout that came with that. And so I was enamored with all of that. So that's what made it the perfect, on the outside anyway, looking in, that's what made it the perfect role for me.
My very first salary out of grad school was the salary that my dad made his last few years of working. And it wasn't a knock on my dad. It was that like, oh my God, I am higher on the ladder now. I am a rung higher than my family. And I think it drives that desire. I don't know about you, but it drives that desire to then continually put your family higher on the ladder. So if my baseline is here, I want to put my kids higher up and et cetera.
It begins to shift generationals, your generational output and status, right? And so I grew up in a low income environment. As an adult, now I have the income that were now at the time my kids and my ex-wife, their mom. There are some things that we could achieve in life, and that I didn't have when I was younger. And so now I'm providing for my kids at a different level than what I was provided for. And so that was something that also made it perfect to be able to have the resources to go to Disneyland with my children, to be able to do some of those activities that wasn't able to do when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I'm so glad you mentioned the status and the clout, because I think that doesn't get talked about a lot of when you take, whether it's a job title or you go to work for a company, if that company is well known, it does kind of raise you up. You get this kind of automatic respect of, oh, you work for Amazon, you work for, I came from Microsoft, and I saw it. The minute I told people I worked for Microsoft, people would be like, oh. And that feeling of like, yeah, I work for Microsoft. I'm in the club. I'm in the club now that I looked at for so long.
Absolutely. And oh my goodness. And here, and I don't want to preempt what your questions here, but the having, when you have and have achieved that level of excellence and achievement, then when it's taken away, what happens to you then?
Let's talk about that, Will. So you have this role, and you said you were fired within the first 90 days, but it took 4 years for that firing to come to fruition. What do you mean? What was happening?
So let's unpack what that really means, right?
All of that.
Yeah. So what that really means is, a lot of times, Jim Watkins, in his book, The First 90 Days, he talks about in the first 90 days in a new position, in a position, even if you're inside of an organization already working, the first 90 days in any new role, you will either excel or fail. I knew within the first 90 days that I was not a good fit at Virginia Tech. And it was in those first 90 days where I actually was fired, quote unquote. It's the politics of the institution that got me within the first 90 days. It took 4 years in order for the firing to manifest itself into action. And a lot of that is around the politics that were played inside of the organization.
So when you say you knew within that first 90 days it was a bad fit, what were those signs? What was telling you?
And here's the thing, I knew intuitively, and then I wanted to say, no, I can push past this. I can make it work, right? And so there was something inside of me that said, nah, man, you can make this work. Don't quit. I've always been told not to quit a job. You got a good job, don't quit the job. Stay with it. Not everything's perfect. That internally was kind of driving me to stay longer than perhaps what I should have. But to respond to your question, one of the first things that was a sign for me, and again, I love Virginia Tech, love working there. No disparations of the university. Just gonna talk a little bit about the leadership and my experience. The institution I worked at prior to going to Virginia Tech was the vice president for student affairs, worked at Virginia Tech. And when I went to him and said, hey, I'm about to apply for this position at Virginia Tech, and hey, I have an interview, he was like, Will, be careful. He said, Virginia Tech eats its young. That was a red flag right there. right? I had even interviewed for the position, and he said, "Be careful, Virginia Tech eats its young." And so I was like, "Oh wow, okay." But I'm like, I hear you, but I'm going. I'm excited.
It won't happen to
Right,
me. It won't happen to
exactly,
me.
absolutely, absolutely. And so that was it. And interesting enough, I was at the time of my hiring, I was the youngest vice president in the president's cabinet at that time, right? And so that notion of eating the young, I was there. And so one could perhaps turn that sentiment around and says that Virginia Tech puts its young through the crucible. And in many ways, as I look at my experience, for me, it was a crucible, but it was a crucible that was good for me. Some of the things that when coming back to your question, when you asked, what were some of the signs of failing with being fired within the first 90 days, the university had an interim vice president in the role as they were searching for a full-time person. My first couple of days on the job, I was informed by that person and also by others that the leadership at the time wanted that person to be the full-time person. So again, red flag, I'm not their first choice. And when you come into jobs, sometimes you're not the first choice. And so that's okay. But now politically, I'm dealing with this person is someone that the leadership wanted to be in the position. I hold the position, and it felt in many ways that the person wanted to maintain the power of the position without having the title per se. And in many ways, it felt as if the institution, the leadership and others in the institution deferred to that person more so than they deferred to me related to leadership and authority. So these are some of the signs that were happening that I was experiencing, just looking around like, okay. And then this person and I, we actually had it was kind of really open warfare between the two of us within the context of the organization. So much so that the provost at the time sat me down and was like, "Hey, you got to work. You got to figure this out. Y'all, we can see it. We can feel it. You two have to figure this thing out." And I thought it was unfair because I felt as if the onus was on me to figure it out. And that other person was not being held to the same degree of accountability and responsibility. And it's interesting. I was just listening to a message. I was listening to a podcast the other day where Coach K was talking about his leadership over 40 years. And one of the things he said was, as the leader, your job as the leader is to resolve all conflicts with peers and with those who report to you. So when I was told by that provost, "Hey, Will, you have to figure it out," I hadn't had that perspective of, as a leader, it is my responsibility to kind of make this thing work. And at the same time, it still is a two-way street. I can do all I can do to try to make it work, but if the other person on the other side is not agreeable to that, then it's just not going to work.
So you mentioned that it took 4 years for it to fully manifest. What do you mean by that? So walk us through that.
Yeah, I think that, so again, I was always being questioned in terms of the path that I was taking as the senior diversity leader expert on the ground. It felt like others within the institution thought that they had more expertise than I did, and felt like there was a lot of, is this the path we should go? I think we should go a different path. And this is coming from people who were not necessarily diversity experts, who didn't go to the conferences. So when I would go to the national conferences, I would go to be in those national think tanks. And so I'm like, okay, here are some best practices. In many ways, it felt like the university leadership didn't want to follow the best practices. They want to follow their own practices, internal practices. And so therefore, I felt like I was on the outside. Although I was inside of the leadership circle, I still felt like I was on the outside of what they really wanted to do. And so I felt myself kind of bouncing against a brick wall if you will, trying to make change happen. So you have the political culture, and then I call it the shadow culture. So the shadow culture is the dark side of the political culture. So there's this the meeting before the meeting, and the decision has already been made. When you walk into the meeting, the decision's been made. You didn't even realize the decision was made until after you leave the meeting. You're like, what just happened? And I've had many of those what just happened moments, right? Now I was able to be successful. I was, when I left the university, I was proud about the things that me and my staff that we were able to accomplish, but it felt like it just took it shouldn't have been that hard.
It sounds mentally exhausting. Your metaphor of bouncing against a brick wall over and over. I mean, when you said that, I was thinking I could probably do that for maybe a few months, maybe, close to a year. And the fact that you did it for so long, it had to be like, was it mentally exhausting?
I thought it was par for the course. And at the time, so now 54 years old, if I had to, oh, absolutely. But I wasn't quite yet 40 yet. So now I'm like, no, this is par for the course. It's just what you got to do, and I will say, I'm glad I did it. I am glad I went through that experience. As badly as it might sound now, when I look at it in its totality, it was the exact thing that I needed for me to become who I am.
Was there any shame or guilt or hesitation to tell people you were fired with the heaviness and just the connotation of that word?
Absolutely. The company line was, we are reorganizing, and therefore we don't need your position. There was a reorg, and they also dismantled my office. And so not only was I displaced, but the people who worked in the office were displaced, but they found jobs for them. They just didn't find a job for me. And the reason was because I had a vice president position, so they didn't have another. If they wanted me, they could have kept me. They could have found a special project. They could have kept me, right? So all that to say is, yes, when it first happened, and for the first couple of years, I tried to put lipstick on a pig, and I was like, yeah, we're reorg, and I was displaced from my job. And then I just came out and said I was fired. I just came out and said it because I wanted people now to I want to normalize that word, being fired. Fired is not it can be life altering. It can change a lot of things, but we cannot be afraid to say that we were fired, because people get fired every day, right? And for me, if it was something that I would have been embarrassed about. So, for example, if it was sexual misconduct, if it was embezzlement, if it was a derelict on my duty, something like that, yes, I would be embarrassed to even have to talk about it. But no, I got let go, not because of those issues. It was really because of reorg and because of the direction that the leadership wanted to go. I wasn't in that direction. Politics, absolutely.
Were you ever angry at the system, at yourself, at anyone around you at Virginia Tech?
You know what? I was not. I was hurt. I was hurt because, again, this to me was my perfect place. This was my this is I love college. I love the community. I love the college atmosphere. This is where I saw myself, if not retiring from there, retiring from a college like that. So this was it, right? So I was hurt. It's something that I worked so hard for had just been taken away, and anger, frustration, all that stuff settled in later, and it really wasn't anger at the decision. It was anger because I just couldn't get another job. And so once I was let go, once I was fired, I thought to myself that I would bounce back in 6 months because, Megan, I had the title. I was coming from a highly credible institution. I had the PhD. I had the experience. I had all of that. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Well, 6 months came, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And I interviewed at the highest levels at colleges and universities all across the country, and people were like, "Okay, well, yeah, they reorg, but what did you do?" I didn't do anything, and so it felt like there was some type of cloud that was hovering over my head, and either I'm not telling the truth or the university. So something's going on where I had to do something wrong in order for them to let me go. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. And so the anger came in not being able to getting another job. And now the anger and the self-doubt. So now there's an imposter syndrome. Was I good enough I got that job? Was that just a fluke? Now I worked three other jobs, two other universities before I got into that position. So the question was, am I as good as I thought I was?
Can I hack it?
Can I hack it? Can I do it? That's where the anger came in. So I'm beyond them, and now I'm looking at the current circumstance, and I'm angry at the circumstance.
Did you ever have moments where you thought maybe I'm going to put in quotes, come back? I don't know where I'm going to end up?
No. In the midst of all of that, I was starting a business with a colleague. I was like, I'm going to bounce back. It was just when will I bounce back? And so there were things that were in place to bring in some income. It just wasn't the same amount of income. And I had these moments and these seasons where I had some pretty good years, and then some seasons where I had some pretty lean years. So I never doubted not bouncing back. It just took longer. And there were moments where I was frustrated, and I'm a spiritual person. I believe in Christ, where I was frustrated with God, and I was like, God, what come on, what are we doing? How long? What's the, and I wasn't even at the point where I was asking, what is the lesson? I was asking, why, God, why?
You mentioned that you felt, or people did assume, that you must have done something wrong. How did you rebuild that trust, not just with yourself, but with others?
One of the things I did was that the university paper stated everything that happened. So they said, hey, the university has dismantled diversity, is reorganizing. So it stated everything. And so I would include that inside of my cover letter. I'm not lying here. This is what they said. Right. So if you don't believe me, go talk to them. And then, you know what? I started building my own brand. I started doing my work in terms of getting myself out there, still moving forward with my vision, my passion, doing good work. And as one of the things I realized, when you do good work, when you bring value, work comes to you, people come to you. People they know that you're not perfect, and they still seek you out when you're providing value. So part of my bounce back strategy was I'm going to be relevant, I'm going to be visible, and I'm going to provide value. I tell my wife all the time, I'm going to bet on me. If nobody else bets on me, I'm going to bet on me. And that's just the idea. Hey, look, Megan, I appreciate it. Absolutely.
You have since taken all these experiences and lessons and turned them into a book and an upcoming podcast, both of which are called Perched in the Storm. So I wanted to ask you, first off, what does Perched in the Storm mean to you?
Think about it like this. There's a storm that is brewing. The winds are strong, and the winds are beating against the tree, and the tree is swaying back and forth, and the leaves of the tree are being ripped away by the wind. The clouds are dark, and rain deluge just comes down, and rain just pours down. And in the middle of it all, sits on a limb is a bird, a bright burnt orange bird, and that bird is perched. Is not flying. It is claws are on that limb, holding on. The bird is not unbothered. You can see the feathers being ruffled. You can see the look on its face is pretty determined to be knocked off its limb by the winds. And that bird is in the middle of the storm. that bird is perched in the storm. And so for me, perched in the storm is all about how do we be steady in the moment of our life storms, in the moment of our professional storms. How do we stay perched and understand that we may not come out of the storm unscathed, but we can be steady and we can be solid and rooted in the moment.
What you said about not being unscathed is so important, because when we go through these middles and we go through these storms, there is maybe this false idea that we're just trying to get back to who we were. That version of you no longer exists.
Some storms will leave scars, and emotional scars, physical scars. So I don't want to romanticize the storm. I want to be very real that the storm impact is real. You can make it through the storm and then the levee breaks. And then when the levee of your life breaks, then what happens? Think about Hurricane Katrina when the levees broke, right? So people made it through the storm. It was the levees that broke that destroyed everything. And in our lives, we can make it through some storms and sometimes levees break. And so I really want people to encourage people, inspire people that, hey, you can be perched. There are some ways in which you can beam through the storm that will help you get through the storm and bounce back a little quicker.
All of this being perched in the storm, I mean, it's resilience. It is, how do you become resilient? Because I also believe, I don't know about you, I believe that there are multiple storms in our lives. You don't get, if you're lucky enough to go through one, may you be the exception, because most people will go through many storms in their life. You have identified several behaviors. I think there's seven behaviors of resilience. What are those 7 behaviors, and were any of those harder for you in real life?
First, let me just go back to this notion of the storm. And to your point, we're either in a storm, we're either coming out of a storm, or we're going into a storm. And that's just life. And so storms, to your point, storms will always happen, and they will always be there with our lives. And so we just have to really recognize that there are seasons that we have storms, or seasons that we don't, and also seasons that we'll be going into the storm. In writing Perched in the Storm, brutal lessons in resilience that every leader can learn from entrepreneurs, I speak about my experience as an entrepreneur and as a leader and the lessons that I've learned through my storms. Then I also interview 10 other people, entrepreneurs, business owners, solopreneurs, and invite them to share their storms and how they made it through their storms. And then I also did research on resilience and to understand what were some of the elements of resilience. From my experience, the experiences of the interviewees, and then the research, I came up with these 7 core behaviors that kind of surfaced as core elements from the research of this book. And so the 7, and I'll name them briefly, is mindset mastery, adaptability, emotional intelligence, service-oriented leadership, continuous learning and innovation, work-life integration, and strategic career growth. And these 7 are not new. These are not new things, right? Not new elements, not new concepts. And a lot of times we apply them in our lives individually for the most part. So we hear a lot of people talk about nowadays emotional intelligence, or we may hear people talk about mindset mastery, right? Well, what makes these 7 strong and it creates more of a superpower and resilience is when you bring them all together and you work on them in tandem, and they create a kind of a harmony of behaviors. I say behaviors and they're not character traits, because a behavior is something that you learn and you do. And when you do more of it, you begin to build a muscle memory. And so these behaviors come from experiencing resilience. Can one person have more resilience than the other person? Yes, but it's not something that is being poured into people, that has been poured into people. It is something that people develop by going through life storms. These 7 behaviors help you to bounce back quicker. when you begin to apply them as a unit. So to respond to your question, the one behavior, I think what the question was, the one behavior that is the hardest, or the one that resonates with me the most.
Which one was the hardest for you?
I think the one that was the hardest for me, and is also the one that is the domino that knocks every other domino down, is mindset mastery. And it was the hardest for me because after going through, we're not even going to talk about the firing, not being able to get another job. So let's just talk about that, because that's where I really have to really lean into the sense of resilience. Not getting another job impacted my sense of self-worth. It impacted my sense of who I thought I was, and the skills and the talent and the value that I thought I brought, when no one else validated me by hiring me. So there's some external factors that impacted me. And so now I am leaning into imposter syndrome. I am leaning into, am I good enough? And it wasn't, my wife introduced me at this time, we're probably talking about 2016, 2017. My wife had introduced me to some motivational speaking on YouTube, and kind of some folks, Billy Osbrook and some other folks that were just speaking about, you're a winner, you get up, you go seize the day. And so I started listening to that motivational speaking, and listening to, how athletes and performers, how they failed and failed many times, stories that I've heard before, but now they truly resonate with me. And so I had to feed my mind, William, you are worth something. William, you can do this. William, you will get through this. And I had to feed my mind. I had to change my whole mindset around the storm that I was going through. And there was a pastor that I really, Miles Monroe, I listened to one of his speeches, his talks. And this is what he said. He said, when you realize that you add value to the world, you will never work a day in your life. Megan, it was that moment where I said, I add value. And it was that moment where my mindset began to shift from I can't to how can I? And the moment that I shifted from I can't get a job to how can I get a job? I can't pay my bills to how can I pay my bills? I am of value, and now I need to reach deep inside of me and bring that value out to humanity. Then that's when everything shifted for me.
Did that mindset shift take practice? Did you have to reiterate to yourself, or did it get easier once you had that revelation?
It got easier. And here's the reality. There were already things in my past that I had already overcome that helped me to continue to strengthen and kind of shift my thinking, right? And so I write this in a book. I was denied from being in the military. I had an operation on my ankles when I was 16 years old, and I went to apply, and the Marine doctors looked at the x-rays of my ankles and said, he's not going to be able to withstand boot camp. My mom and I, and that was my plan A, B, and C. I was going into the military. My mom and I, we wrote a letter, congressional, and we got a congressional waiver from our congressman. So I overcame, right? At 18, I was in a dance group, and we failed miserably. It was an epic fail, and we were embarrassed. And you think about New Edition and the Temptations, those type of dances. We did that back in the 90s, right? MC Hammer. And so we did all that. Yeah, so we did all those types of dances, and we failed. It was an epic fail. Came back the following year, and we won. Success leaves cues. Success leaves clues. In this moment in my adult life, so all this stuff happened in my teenage years, but in my adult life, this is the first time I've ever been tested in this way. I have to go back to the clues that success left from my younger years. And then listening to the motivational tapes, and when you ask, I had to do that every day. It was a practice. I put that on and just listen to those messages and let those messages seep into my soul, seep into my spirit. You can do this. Yes, it's hard. Yes, you're going to cry. Go ahead and cry, Will. Just go ahead and cry, but get up. While you're crying, work. While you're crying, send an email. While you don't know how you're going to get the bills paid, work on a speech, so do something. And that's something else that I had to do, Megan, is I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and stay in that moment of crying and not do anything. So I was crying, writing out a speech, so I don't know how this bill's going to get paid, but I'm still writing out this speech. So.
It was probably a great speech because it from the part.
Absolutely.
How do you know when it's time to stop pushing through something and actually start letting it go?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That comes to that mindset mastery. Then we come to adaptability, and adaptability is all about the pivot, right? And so how do we pivot? My goodness. Sometimes we have to get to a point to where we don't stay in things longer than what we should. And I think that we get so emotionally connected to stuff, and we want to make it work. And so we stay in it longer because we want to make it work. We're emotionally connected. But I think we have to ask ourselves the question, is this causing me joy? Does this take away from my joy? Is staying in this thing, is pursuing that, whatever it is I'm pursuing, does it add value to me? Does it add value to the community? Can I do something else and still add the same value? I had some advice from another mentor. I was in a business relationship, and it was time to move on beyond that relationship, and I didn't want to do it. I'm a person that I stay in things. I tend to stay in things longer than what I should, and I didn't want to move beyond it. I saw some value in it, but this was the question that was asked of me. Will, can you achieve everything that you've been achieving without this person? I said, yes. He said, you have your answer. When you can look at circumstances and you say, I can do this without that, I know I can, and there's proof of that, then you probably have an answer for a pivot. And sometimes our intellectual selves know when we need to make the pivot. It is our emotional selves that holds us back.
That is such powerful advice and such a powerful question to ask anyone when they are going through that. What would you say to people who are afraid to share their story, especially if their story involves failure?
I say you are being selfish if you are not sharing your story. Success and failure are on the same path to being fully human. So you cannot have success without having failure. So you have to talk about your failure, because as a matter of fact, the reason you're successful is because you failed. We learn from the failure. And yes, failure is embarrassing. And yes, you may have to wait 10 years to talk about a failure because you have to get over it. But once you get over it, you got to talk about it, because now you have to share with others. Our jobs as humans is we have to help the current generation and prepare the future generation. And so the knowledge that we have acquired during our lifetimes is not meant to be bottled up inside of us. It is meant for us to share it to help humanity.
Speaking of that, then, if you could go back, if you could pick up the phone and call the Dr. Will Lewis who had just been reorged and let go, what would you tell him?
You're more than worthy. You're not the only one that this has happened to. So you're going to be okay.
I think that you're not the only one. That is a message that so many people need to hear. You feel so alone.
Yes.
Even if your brain can logically tell you you're not, but having someone else tell you that is so powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, Will, we are at our lightning round section. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Absolutely.
What was the last thing you Googled?
The last thing I Googled was how to do rounding in healthcare. As a healthcare professional and nurses, you round and you go see your patients on the floor, and you kind of see what the environment is and how to engage in rounding. And so that's the last thing I Googled is best practices around rounding.
If you weren't doing your current career, what would you do?
I don't know, because what I'm doing, I love. This is my retirement. This is me, right? And so I don't have anything that I wanted. Okay, if I didn't have to work, I would be on a beach somewhere, just on the beach, and also at a golf course. So I need a beach and a golf course, and those are two things I would be doing.
I would also be on a beach, especially as it gets cold in the winter.
Yeah, absolutely.
What is your favorite movie?
I have so many, but I'm going to say Gladiator. Gladiator, Russell Crowe back in 2020, or not 2020, it's 2000. Gladiator. Yeah, Gladiator is my favorite movie.
What is your favorite thing? We're coming up on the holidays. What is your favorite thing to eat on Thanksgiving?
Sweet potato pie. That's my favorite thing to eat on Thanksgiving.
What is your favorite city in the U.S.?
My folks in Indianapolis are going to be mad with me, but I want to. I tell you, let me put it like this: Indianapolis, born and raised, but a city that I love to visit, but I can only take it in chunks, is New York, Manhattan. I love to visit New York, and so, but I wouldn't want to live there, but most certainly just want to like to visit. It is a fun place.
It's a fun place to go, and it's a fun place to leave.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
If you could time travel for one moment, where would you go?
Oh, wow. I want to go back and talk with Malcolm X.
What would you ask him?
If you know Malcolm's story, he kind of made a transition after he went to Mecca. And so I want to talk with him just about, because he talks about engaging with white Muslim, blue eyes Muslims. And so I want to talk to him about his thought process and his transition from being the Malcolm in the Nation of Islam to being the Malcolm that we saw right before his assassination, because I think he was making a transition closer and closer to racial reconciliation that we hadn't yet seen from him.
That would be a fascinating conversation. What is one bucket list item you want to fulfill?
I want to go to Africa, specifically. I think it's Nigeria, but I want to go where you begin to kind of trace back the my ancestors around the slave trade, and so to kind of go back and understand and experience some of that. Back in 2022, me and a couple of my friends, two of my white friends, we went to Alabama and Mississippi, and we traced the civil rights pathway, and that was just such a powerful thing to experience with them, and so I would love to do that.
What is your favorite comfort food?
Pizza. I love pizza.
What's on it?
Pepperoni sausage, and then if I'm really feeling adventurous, I'm gonna put pepperoni sausage, mushrooms, peppers, onions. So kind of everything minus anchovies.
Pineapple?
No.
Yeah.
No
pizza.
No pineapple. No barbecue chicken. No Hawaiian.
No spinach.
No spinach. No.
If you suddenly became a billionaire, what is the first thing you would buy?
I wouldn't buy anything. I would invest. I would first pay off all my loans, and then I would build a foundation.
And last, what is one conspiracy theory you hope is true?
I hope Area 51 is true. I would love to go and see what's inside of Area 51. I want to see the aliens, the remnants of the aliens that's inside of Area 51.
Have you ever heard of Janet? It's the airplane that leaves out of the Las Vegas airport and takes Area 51 workers up to Area 51 so it flies them out. So they commute from Vegas, but it's just another non-existent transportation or something. There's a nickname for it, but it is an unmarked airplane. There's no anything. You can Google it. It's called Janet. Yep. And Janet takes people up in the morning and brings them back down at night. And you know, when it's taken off, they're going up to Area 51. Well, Will, where can people find you and where can they find your book?
Well, they can find me at william@wtlewis.com. And if they go to www.wtlewis.com/perch, PERCH, they can find the book there. And also find me on LinkedIn.
I encourage everyone to seek you out. You are such an enigmatic speaker. You are such an engaging speaker. You share your story so openly. And I love, 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 love what you said about if you're not sharing your story, you're being selfish. So I so appreciate you coming on and talking with us and giving all of your wisdom and insights and advice to a community that really needs to hear it right now. So thank you for being here.
Megan, I am honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. This has been fun. And so I really enjoyed this. Is the highlight of my day. So thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to The Middle. If today's story resonated with you, drop a subscribe, share the episode, and let's keep these conversations going. Until next time, remember, your story isn't over. You're just in the middle.